Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
So, after that dense Hyder episode last time, we're back with another Zeitgeist episode this week. Like last time, it will be more relaxed, more news-focused, and personal news-focused, and hopefully just an easy listen. You will not be tested on this. Okay, so how about we start with an update on the current government talks in Austria, Carmen, and maybe a little bit about how the system differs from the U.S. That could help, a lot of our listeners, I think. I came across something in my feed here this week. It said that the FPO, that same party we were talking about that won the recent elections that Haider was a part of back in his time, they did well in another state election in Austria. Styria, that's your family's home state, I think. So yeah, is there any update on that? It'd be interesting if you could just tell us more about how the Austrian system works. Any updates here?
There are some updates. So yeah, you're right that there was this election in Styria. That is my home state, or where my family's from,
Okay.
in the southern part of Austria. And you're very up to date because that election literally was today.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
man, news is scary. I just kind of scrolled today and I'm like, okay, that probably happened last week.
No, that happened today. And yeah, I also got like a, notification from my news app that the FPÖ had won. I didn't really look into the article any further than that because I sort of had to have enough of FPÖ news to last me a lifetime, I think.
There is a lot happening right now, isn't there?
Yeah, election-wise, I'm just a
Yeah.
little not trying to not deal with any of it too much, I think. But I do think it's really interesting maybe to look at how the Austrian system works because it is different from the American system. And it does kind of dictate what the parties then can do or cannot do. So this state election today in Styria, I mean, that's a more local thing, right? That's
Okay.
the state election. I think I would rather talk a little bit more about, the national elections and how they work, which was the election that happened a few weeks ago,
Right.
where there are still these government talks going on, right? Which is maybe the first question, in the US or in some other countries, you don't necessarily have these talks going on for ages. So, what is that all about?
Mm-hmm.
So just to give a basic background, in Austria, the system of voting for parliament is that you vote for a party,
Okay.
and then each party has a list of people, and like the more votes that a party gets, the further down the list you go in terms of who gets into parliament,
Okay.
right? So they up front have this list, and then those people get into parliament, and if you have lots of votes, then more people get in, and it just goes down the list one after the next
Oh, like in order.
in order.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a prioritized list, and you always, in the voting booth, you always will have, sheets of paper hung out with these lists so that you kind of know, what is the order, who are the top 10 people or whatever that would get into parliament, because
Right.
I guess that's important for some people. I usually don't know who most of these people are, so it doesn't mean much to me.
Okay, interesting.
And in true Austrian style, they always list their academic titles, which is one thing that I found kind of interesting because I was talking to some, I don't know, friends or coworkers or something here, and they were surprised that the American ballot, for example, doesn't have titles on it.
Yeah.
Like,
Honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen that. Like doctor something. Maybe I have once or twice, but okay.
yeah, it's very, I don't know, I think it's very Austrian. They love their titles. But in any case, so that's the basic system, right? You have a list for each party, and then you vote for the party, and then based on the number of votes, so and so many people get into parliament. But in order to get into parliament at all, you have to have 4% of the vote. So there's kind of this first hurdle of 4% that you have to achieve, and then you kind of start going down the list.
Okay.
And, get some more or less proportional representation of seats in the parliament.
Okay.
It's not exactly proportional. There's some little calculation, which I don't know very much
Of
about.
course there is.
Of course. Yeah. Basically, at the end of the day, this kind of calculation does slightly favor bigger parties over smaller parties, but
Okay.
it's more or less proportional.
And whatever. In all these countries, right, it's always like democracy, little asterisk, and there's some little, thing to make it work or whatever. Offered without comment. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, although I think it also has to do with if you got 37% of the votes and 37% of parliament would be I don't know.
2.5 people.
Exactly, 2.5 people. You have
Got
to do
it,
something
okay.
about that, right? So
Right.
you have to always somehow round it. And so the parliament itself is made up of two houses. You have the National Council, or the Nationalrat in German, and you have the Federal Council, which is the Bundesrat.
Okay.
So this election that took place a few weeks ago was for the National Council, and that is the only part of this parliament that you actually directly vote for.
Okay. And that again will be just like voting for a party, not a person.
Correct. You vote for the party.
Okay. Okay.
But you do know upfront who is the top person from that party.
Right. From those lists.
On those lists, and those are the people that then...
Okay.
And then the biggest party generally will, or the party that gets the most votes, usually will then have the chancellorship. So the first person on the list of the biggest party will become chancellor.
Which is like the leader, of the country.
Which is the person who has the most power and is the leader of the country, correct?
Okay.
There is also a president, but they're not as powerful. They are, in certain circumstances, they do have a lot of power, but they're more symbolic and more ceremonial.
Okay.
And
all right.
And so that's a little bit part of the discussions now, because the FPÖ is the biggest party, or the party that got the most votes, and so the head of their party is the guy who should become chancellor, but he will not become chancellor because nobody wants to do a coalition with him. And so that has been part of like the discussions or the controversy as well, because like technically you expect the biggest party and the one with the most votes to then have the chancellorship, but in this case it will not be like that. And it's not the first time that that's happened.
Okay. And I think this is the unintuitive part for a lot of Americans, right? Where it's like, okay, they're elected, you should then know, like, you have a list or whatever. But okay, so there's this wrangling about like, all right, what coalition will be the biggest now between the parties, right? And I don't know, from that Hyder episode we just had, right? Sometimes the top ranking person, well, that isn't who it's going to be because of some other wrangling. Okay, so we're sort of in the middle of that process still.
Exactly. We're in that process.
Okay.
And yes, it's exactly what happened with Hyder as well, right? And yeah, the reason that you have this wrangling is because you generally have to form a coalition.
Okay.
If a party gets 50% of the vote or more, then they don't have to form a coalition. So in that case, it's just clear. The leader of that party is the chancellor, and they get to decide, who is in which ministry and whatever, and they don't need to form a coalition. But that very rarely happens because you have lots of parties, and they are, it's not like in the US where you really only have 2 major parties. You have 4, 5, 6 major parties that all get a decent amount of votes. And then somehow they have to sort of decide how they're going to govern together. So for some facts and figures, the Nationalrat, the National Council, which is what this election was for, has 183 seats. The terms are 5 years. And
it's pretty long. Okay.
It is pretty long, actually, yeah. So we have this election only every 5 years. And this part of Parliament passes federal laws and budgets and is the legislative body within the Parliament. So they are passing the laws.
Okay, all right.
Then you have the other house in Parliament, which is the Federal Council, the Bundesrat. It's much smaller. It's only 61 seats, and they represent the interests of Austria's 9 states at the federal level. And so the Bundesrat, they really only review and approve laws made by the National Council. So like I said, in this recent election, which, now is also, it's been a while. The election was in September.
Oh, September. Okay, man. I thought it was like a month ago. So yeah, more than.
No, I think it's been about 2 months now. But the discussions are ongoing, right?
Okay.
So it was an election for this National Council, and because no party got an outright majority, which is almost always how it ends up, then the main parties that got the most votes kind of need to go into coalition discussions with each other to figure out, can they compromise on enough stuff? Can they agree on enough stuff to like reasonably govern together? And what are the things that they would need to agree on upfront in order to then actually be a functional government? And that could be really, really difficult. On the one hand, the coalitions are nice because it kind of forces people to cooperate and to kind of think about like, okay, where can we compromise? What are the things where we might, do some kind of give and take? But on the other hand, it also can lead to really slow decision making and can kind of turn into these stalemates where parties don't agree. It also can make it hard to even form a government because you have to somehow get a couple of these parties to really cooperate with each other and say, okay, we're actually going to do this. And so that's the current situation. You have these talks. They have actually progressed quite decently, I think, by now.
Oh, okay.
So it was pretty clear pretty early on that the FPÖ, although they got the most votes, would not be in the government.
Okay.
Because all the other bigger parties said that they would not do a coalition with them. And their main sticking point was the head of the party and that they didn't want him to have the chancellorship. And so instead, the situation now is that the SPÖ and the ÖVP will form a coalition, which are the 2 parties that have... These are the grand coalition parties that we talked about in the Hyder episode, right? These are the 2 parties that have classically been in power.
Okay, and they like ranked 2nd and 3rd?
They ranked 2nd and 3rd.
In the election?
Correct.
Okay.
good bit behind the FPÖ, but still big enough that they together can form a coalition.
Okay.
But if it's just the two of them, they have a very, very slim margin, and that means they have much less of a mandate. And so there are now discussions if one of the like pretty small parties will join them, which is the Neos.
That's is that one party called that? Or is
yes.
this like a group of parties? Okay.
No, the Neos is a party. They're a newish party. I think they've maybe been around for 20 years or so. And they're kind of like neoliberal. They're very pro-Europe. They're very, pro-big business, actually. They're a sort of moderate party, I would say, but sort of, a neoliberal party that's quite small. I think they normally get 7 or 8% of the vote. And now there's these talks about whether they will join the coalition so that it's a 3-party coalition in government.
Okay.
But there are some big ideological differences that they kind of need to overcome. So that is where the state of the discussions currently are. And these discussions can go on for quite a while.
Okay, yeah, apparently.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been 2 months now. That's pretty normal. I think 2 to 3 months is sort of often around the time that it takes. And so on the one hand, it's the kind of system that does provide some kind of stopgap for extremist parties because you kind of can form a coalition without them potentially, which is, what's happening now. And it makes smaller parties much more viable than in the US, right? Where smaller parties just don't have much of a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, what is the typical amount of time it takes? So you're thinking like 3 months or something? So maybe like in a month you would have clarity on this?
I think so, yeah. 2 to 3 months is generally what it takes. But sometimes it can take...
All right, so like beginning of the year.
Sometimes it can take longer. I mean, in Austria, it hasn't really been much of an issue, but this kind of system is very common in Europe, right? Many countries have this kind of coalitioning system. And so you do sometimes wind up in situations where it takes countries half a year, even longer to form a government. And then you have these headlines about, I think Spain back in 2010 or so, it took them like a year to form a government. And, that's kind of embarrassing and not great. And then you have talks about, a failed state because you can't even come up with a government. And that is what can happen if these coalition talks just kind of don't progress and nobody can agree. Then you just wind up in this weird limbo state of like, well, we're still talking about it, but like we kind of need a government and kind of don't have one. And then that can also be like a problematic situation.
Right. Okay. So the FPO wins. They won. They're not going to be in government. What does that mean then, right? Because my understanding of this usually is like, if you keep the winner out, fine, they go into opposition, they can say things like, they're not including us even though we won, and therefore support us more, y'all. Or whatever the Austrian version that is, right? Like, is that gonna happen, you think? Like, is that gonna happen, you think? Or can they just keep doing this?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. They can definitely keep doing this. And of course, they're going to play exactly that playbook of, we were democratically elected and we're not in government. And so this is, a miscarriage of justice. And, I'm sure that there will be lots of talk about how this is not properly democratic and all of that. Yeah, there will.
Because wasn't there was that case in the Netherlands, I thought, like not too long ago, right? They kind of had this super right-wing kind of party leader, and it was like they were shut out of government in the past, I think, right? Like I may not know this, but what I remember, it was like they're kept out of government, but then most recently that party won again, and it was like, okay, fine, you can be in government, just not him. So I just thought that maybe something would happen like this because the FBO has kind of been here before. So like...
Yeah, we've been here a couple of times. It's really hard to say. And there's both arguments, right? Some people were saying, even if they don't like the FPÖ and they would never vote for them, they were kind of actually hoping that they would be part of the government just because, I mean, anytime the FPÖ is in the government, it basically collapses within 2 years because they are not particularly competent and there's always some scandal. And so that is kind of the one side where you say, well, then they don't have this argument of, we've been locked out and people voted for us, but we're shut out of government and it's unfair. And, basically it forces them to then govern. And then usually that always goes sideways pretty quickly. And then, you have a new election and that might be like the better scenario. ultimately. The other side is, they are shut out. They potentially will get a lot more support. That's kind of the fear, right? Is that because they are shut out, that they can really play this whole victim card, and that they then maybe even will have the 50% in the next election and won't have to form a coalition. I mean, that is a danger. That is a potential thing that can happen. On the other hand, even if they're only in government for like 2 years and then it all falls apart, they can do a lot of damage in that time. So yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, it's a lose-lose scenario. We've been here before. Even when the FPÖ is in government and it falls apart, people still vote for them. So it doesn't really seem to have much consequence. So it's like, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. I do think that they probably will gain votes in the next election because, of course, they can play the sort of outsider card of like, oh, look, this government isn't doing anything.
Right. Like they won, but they're still outsiders. Yeah.
And we actually won, and, it's unfair and whatever. So, I mean, I think it probably does help their chances next time around. But at the same time, I kind of think anytime they're not in government, it's sort of a good thing because the amount of corruption and the stuff that they do, they can just do a lot more damage when they're actually in power than when they're out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, hard to say.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we'll touch on that next time and kind of see where that's at as far as, governments being formed. But okay, yeah, that's interesting as an American to kind of see that and compare, the systems. All right.
But maybe let's move on to something not as heavy as all this election talk.
Yes. In lighter news, the Detroit Lions, an American football team, is in the Austrian news recently. There's a special backstory for both of us here. We both spent all or part of our childhoods in Detroit, Michigan, in the U.S. I looked at this article. I was kind of impressed by how detailed it was. Like, it was not just saying, oh, there's this team playing a weird sport here in Vienna today. Like, it was really covering what happened on the field. Kind of implies to me that people really followed this sport there. Like, I translated this from German. This is not, just some like ESPN article or something. This is like local. So yeah, tell me about that. Like, there are fans there? Does this... I mean, I've heard of, a game, like some kind of exhibition game happening in London or something, but Austria? And I looked and there was like kind of I don't know. Yeah, it was more than I thought. Like, they had a whole schedule for like games.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I saw this article. It was just in my, I have like this news app. ORF is like the main news channel here. It's like the CNN or whatever of Austria. And then this headline comes up about the Detroit Lions. And yeah, as you said, we both lived in Detroit. And so, of course, it caught my eye. And I was like, what is an article about the Lions doing in ORF, like the Austrian news? So yeah, super random. But I guess there's like major Lions hype these days, which I also hadn't quite been following.
Okay. I didn't know they did. All right.
Okay, so we're clearly not on top of what's going on here.
Yeah, not really huge NFL fans. But is this like if you go to a bar, you would stumble into a bar that is playing the NFL? Like, is that common? Okay, or this is like a niche interest there?
Never seen it.
Okay.
Like soccer, you will see a lot, right? Those games will be on.
Right.
And I mean, the NFL games, they're on at like, 3:00 in the morning or something here. Because it's like Monday night football, I think, right? And then
so Tuesday morning football.
Yeah, I don't even know what time that would be here, but it's like not anything normal.
Yeah.
But there are major fans. For example, my cousin is like the biggest Detroit Lions fan, or just NFL fan, I think in general. He lives here in Austria. He knows everything. He's got like all the swag. He's got sweaters, he's got hats, he's got the whole thing.
Okay.
And it's so funny because when my brother-in-law was here visiting, he's like a big sports guy too, and he lives in Detroit. And, he was kind of like talking to my cousin and like trying to explain football to him. And it turns out that my cousin knows more than he does, basically, and sort of like knew all the stats. And he literally wakes up at 3:00 in the morning to watch these games.
Whoa, okay, because, there's definitely people will, like, wear some Manchester United jersey here, right? Like, it happens, and people are into it. But I kind of assume that it's like, oh, yeah, you like, follow the news, you're not watching every game. Maybe they are, okay? And I'm not, like, it's not a core interest of mine, obviously. So, yeah, I can't even wrap my head around it, I guess.
I mean, I think it is a very small...
Watching the games.
I think it is a very small crowd, but they're very devoted. And it's growing.
Okay.
Like, I don't think anybody really watched American football here 20 or 30 years ago, but it's kind of becoming a thing. And there are one or two clubs in Vienna that I know of that, like, sort of collegiate level intramural, whatever level, play American football on, I don't know, the weekends or something. So it's kind of got a growing following, apparently enough to be in the news, which very much surprised me.
Interesting.
And yeah, maybe they're just trying to get in on the American Lions hype. The only reason I even know that there is a Lions hype is because, I saw this news article and I sent it also to my brother-in-law, that same guy I was just mentioning, who's very into the sports. And he immediately wrote back being like, oh yeah, the Lions are, winning a bunch. And I guess they're it's a big deal.
Okay. Go to bed. You guys be like, no, listen. Stop waking up for those. Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right.
So yeah, I guess.
I don't know if we have any other closing comments. It's okay, I guess. This is our take, it's not even judging. I'm all right.
Well, it's kind of interesting.
Cool.
As a Detroiter anyway, I mean, the Lions always sucked and they always lost. That was the whole thing, right? Being a Lions fan meant you were very devoted because they never, they didn't win a game for, I don't know, ages.
Not a decade, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
And I guess now they're good, so that's nice. So go Lions, good for them.
I think that's a good place to end that. Okay, then next we got a listener question. Thanks again, Joanna. Kind of about things to do in Vienna, but they touched on Christmas markets, right? So, Carmen, I was hoping you can give us a rundown of the best markets. I just kind of assume that you're into these. I don't know. There's hot wine. I feel like it's something that we do, actually. I've been to a few Christmas markets myself, but I think only in Belgium. So I kind of wonder, maybe it's different. It was I think it was a pretty touristy one. So, yeah, what can you tell us? I would assume there's a strong Christmas market scene there.
It is Christmas market season. Yes, there is a strong scene.
Cool.
It is pretty much what you do in November and December. Actually, by the time Christmas rolls around, I'm usually so sick of these Christmas markets because you've, spent way too much time there. But in November, it's still very exciting. So in the last, 10 days or so, I'd say pretty much all the markets have opened up. I'll give a very quick history because I think it is also kind of interesting. So the Christmas markets really only started in the 18th century. In the Middle Ages and during that time, there were no markets like this. You just had normal food markets and whatever, but you didn't have these specialized markets.
You didn't risk plague to go get hot wine at that point.
I know, weak.
The rules were just different, right?
Yeah, these days, let me tell you, we all risked COVID and went anyway.
Oh, you're right. We risk plague now. Okay, that's the distinction. Right.
Although, to be fair, I think they actually did not open the Christmas markets for 1 or 2 years because of COVID. I don't even remember now exactly, but there were workarounds. We definitely got our hot wine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
So originally there was just one market, which was the Christmas market, and it sort of moved over time. So it started in a part of the city that's called the Vrijung, which is in the first district very close to the university.
Okay.
Then it got moved to Am Hof, which is just down the street from there, and there is still a market there that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then it moved to Stephansplatz, so in front of the St. Stephen's Cathedral in the very center of the city. So it kind of migrated a little bit. And for, the first, 150 years or whatever, this one market basically always opened on December 5th and then went through New Year's.
Okay.
So it was only open for 3 weeks or so. That has changed a lot. They open way earlier now. I have the feeling that they open earlier and earlier every year.
Yeah.
I guess they can make more money with it, right? But, I think when I first moved here, it was sort of November 15th was more or less when they opened. I feel now it's more November 10th. They're all kind of opening earlier, some a little bit earlier than others, but there's a million of them now. There's not just one market. And so I'm going to talk about a few of them. I'm not going to talk about all of them because I don't even think I know all of them, and it would probably not be very interesting. But there are some big ones and some...
innumerable.
Yes, they have just mushroomed out of the ground every year. You're oh, there's a Christmas market here? Okay. Every year there's some new one someplace.
Okay, so what's your top couple?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with one that is absolutely not my top one and not one that I would go to, but it is the biggest one. So, like I said, historically there was just one big market and it kind of moved locations a couple of times. And its final resting place, so the place where it still exists, is in front of the Rathaus.
Okay.
So in front of the city hall. That's the biggest market. It's the one that everybody knows. If you Google Vienna Christmas market, that's the one that comes up. It was established there in 1975 as the main market and was the only market still at that time. So it's the biggest one. It's the most touristy one. It's kind of the one that people know.
Okay.
And other ones only really started springing up in the 1980s. So if you really want to do like the tourist thing, then the Rathaus, I guess, is where you would go. It's one that I have to say I avoid because it's just like way too many people, very, very touristy.
Okay.
But you have a massive Christmas tree there that I guess is a thing, you know. They always, and the Christmas tree always comes from a different state.
All right.
So it comes from one of the Austrian states and they kind of rotate the states. And so then,
it's kind of cool.
yeah, and then you're like, oh, this year it's from Tyrol or whatever. So that's kind of a thing.
Okay.
And it definitely has the most stands. So you have lots of little trinkets that they sell. Food, wine, of course. I mean, that's standard.
Yeah. So this started a year or two in Seattle where they had these things like, okay, yes, this is a Christmas market. And it's sort of like European style-ish, right? And it's like in the middle, there is some kind of hot wine and like drink kind of stand. And then it's the same kind of thing that I think you're saying. It's kind of like trinkets and or other kind of snacks and or I think that's it, really. Like maybe there's like jelly or like there's I don't know, it's like going to a farmer's market kind of thing with like more 3D printed ornaments or something. I don't know. Like is that generally what's there?
Yeah.
Like those categories?
Yeah, it's generally like Christmas themed, mostly like, ornaments.
You could get an
or
ornament.
Or like these little wooden toys or whatever. But you will also have stands with like soap or candles or incense and these kind of things.
Artisan-ish kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. But I have to say at the Rathaus, it's the least interesting stuff. You don't really, it's like pretty much all mass produced. Okay. I don't think you really have local artists there. At some of the other ones you do. But the Rathaus, it is very touristy. But I guess it can be nice to see, like, because they light up the Rathaus really nicely. You know, the city hall itself, the Rathaus, is a really nice building. And so they do some lighting on it. They used to, I'm not sure if they still do this because I haven't been there in a long time myself, but they used to also do like an advent calendar in the windows of the city hall.
Okay, see, yeah, this
has some appeal.
Right, maybe I don't want to spend the day there, but it's sounding like it's like, okay, maybe there's like cooler light shows. There's sort of like some upside to this massiveness of this Christmas market. Okay.
The good news is you can walk from there very quickly to another one. So yeah, you can have a look and then move on to something better.
All right, sounding better and better.
So another very big one is at Karlsplatz, which is also this big square, and you have a big church there that's really nice. And that's one that I really like. It's also really big. It's definitely one of the bigger ones. But they have a lot more of these local artists there, like local stands. It's like the one Christmas market where I feel like you will find different things from the other ones. So if you're looking more for like a present or something to gift somebody, I kind of think Karlsplatz is a good one to go to because, there's...
Okay.
It's not all the mass-produced stuff. You really do have local people who come and they have their, like, I don't know, little wooden stuff that they make or, paintings or whatever. And so that would be my go-to one if I was looking for an actual gift for someone.
Okay.
And then they also have, like, a little petting zoo there.
Whoa.
Which actually can get really gross because there's all this hay on the ground. And then it gets all, like, dirty and slushy and wet.
Whoa. All right. I sort of like this wild card now. There's, like, domesticated, I guess, animals, but there's animals there. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's, like...
a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, a little bit of chaos. I think it's, like, sheep and... I don't know.
Sounds Christian-y, like manger-esque themed.
Yeah, is that the idea? Maybe that is the idea, that it's like a living manger. Maybe.
Sure. Okay, you're going to check this year and let us know.
I'm actually going there this week, so I can find out.
Okay.
Yeah. Then you have another one that's not too far away from there, which is Museumsquartier. We always call it MQ, the Museum's Quarter.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of this big area where you have a bunch of museums. Actually, historically, this whole like campus or whatever of of museums. It used to be the horse stables for the Habsburgs.
Okay. I definitely remember this area. Like, it is massive. I could see see them fitting a ton.
Yeah, you've been there. We've been there together, I'm quite sure. It's a place that people hang out throughout the year. And yeah, during Christmas time, they set up a market there too. This one I like because they specialize in drink. Like, there's no trinkets.
Oh.
There's no other knickknacks or nonsense. It's like, no, you're coming here to drink wine. Like, that's the point. And maybe get some food.
Oh, okay.
So I think they have their priorities straight, personally.
Really good. That sounds very good. Okay.
It's like they're not messing around with all this other stuff. It's like, no, you get mulled wine and maybe some food. And that's that.
Okay. What's it called there?
It's called MQ, Museumsquartier.
Oh, no, the wine.
Oh, the wine. In German, it's called Glühwein.
Glühwein? Okay.
Which is mulled wine. So it's a warm wine with some spices in it.
Okay. And it will just be like, so it's drinking centric, so it's going to be like a bunch of different ones? Or is it like, there's also hot chocolate, or there's also like...
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's
what?
Glühwein, which is the wine. But then there's also Punsch. Mm-hmm. Actually, most of it is Punsch.
Okay.
Which there's tons of different ones of that. So Glühwein is basically always the same. It's a red wine that's warm with like some spices in it. But then Punsch, you can have a bunch of different kinds. And it's made with various types of alcohol. And they'll have like a berry punch with, blackberries and raspberries in it. And then you'll have an orange punch that has an orange flavor. And then they get very creative. Apple cinnamon or whatever. All kinds of random stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
And then, of course, there's the Kinderpunsch, which is the kids' version, which is without the alcohol.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you drink there.
That's the top of my list so far, that one.
Yes. Then, like, sort of just around the corner from there, actually. I mean, these are all really close to each other. And most of them are, of course, concentrated in the city center. One of the nicest ones that people always like to go to, I like to go to it as well, is called Spittelberg. And this is one that is really in the back streets, like in these little kind of cobblestone streets. All the rest of the ones that I've talked about are like in squares and in big open spaces. And so you can kind of, it spreads out quite big. But Spittelberg, it's kind of nice and cozy because it's kind of nestled into these 2 or 3 little streets, and it's this old part of town, so you have cobblestones.
That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah. And these kind of like cool old buildings. It's just very pretty, very cozy. But it can also get very, very crowded because you are sort of in these narrow streets. And so that's kind of like the drawback to that one. Sometimes if there's too many people, it can feel a bit claustrophobic because you're kind of squeezed into these like little alleyways.
Okay.
But it's for sure the cutest one and the nicest one. And I was just there last week and it was lovely. If you go early, it's fairly empty and it's just like a nice vibe.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah. And then the last one that I'm going to mention, I mean, there's a million more, but the last one that I will mention is Am Hof, which is not really a well-known one. It's not really even a very popular one, but it is where the original Christmas market, like way back in 1700, whatever, or maybe around 1800, where that original Christmas market was established. And it still exists. There's like a little carousel there. It's small. It's not a very big one, but it's like very central in the city. And it's apparently the only place that I know of where you can get Dubai chocolate, which apparently is a thing. Do you know anything about this?
I've never heard of that. Is this like a drink? Or what is it?
No, it's chocolate that you eat, like a chocolate bar. I never heard about this either until last week. It's like a TikTok trend, I guess. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know what's going on there. But I guess it's like a thing. It's like chocolate that has this like crispy knafa kind of phyllo dough in it. It's like kind of crispy and then it's got like some pistachio, I think, in it as well. And it costs...
Sounds kind of good.
It actually is really good. But one bar of Dubai chocolate costs like $20, which is absurd.
Phyllo dough? Okay, which is not. All right. We got to get on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it comes from Dubai, which I think is why it's called that. And so anyway, at this Christmas market, Am Hof, you can get a crepe with Dubai chocolate in it, which I did last week because somebody told me about it and they were like, you have to try this. And so I did. It is actually really good, but the crepe costs, I think it costs like 14 euros because of this Dubai chocolate, which is like kind of steep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crepe. All right.
So I guess that's the thing. If you're on top of the TikTok trends, that's the place to go.
Yeah. Okay, well, you've given us several to think over here. I didn't know that we had a Christmas market critic here on the show. Okay. This can be your separate podcast Wow, all right.
Yeah.
I actually love Christmas markets too, though. Okay, like, and even the Seattle one, which is not very good. Okay, no offense to anybody who went or loved it or something. Like, I didn't think it was that good. I ended up going like 3 times because it's just like an easy place to meet people, and then you can get this drink and I don't know. So it's just like the whole motion of it kind of makes sense to me. So yeah, I'd probably be going to them a lot too if I lived there.
It's a thing to do. It's a place to hang out. It's
like
it's easy.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice for the couple of weeks that it exists, and then it's also nice when they're gone again.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's an event. It's time boxed. That's good. And like you kind of appreciate it while it's there, and then move on with your life.
Okay, so please post some pictures from those and the ones that you tour this season.
Will do. The ones that I talked about, except for the Rathaus, are all ones that I've been to already, which tells you something. Yes, which tells you something because like they've been open for a week.
Okay, this is not like legacy knowledge. This is within the last 24 hours or something. Great.
Oh wait, no, that's a lie. I didn't go to Karlsplatz yet, but I am going this week.
Okay. Before we wrap up, perhaps we can end with the elephant in the room. For us, I think for many people. Where were you, Carmen, during the American election? How is it sitting with you so far?
Yeah.
Etc.
Well, yeah, this topic keeps coming up. It's a little hard to avoid. I'm trying to avoid it.
Right. As an American in Vienna.
Yeah, I'm like the only American a lot of people know, so of course they're asking me about this. Well, I have to say the election night itself, I was in Tenerife, which is an island like in the Atlantic Ocean. It belongs to Spain.
Removed, yeah, you were on a beach.
I just removed myself from reality, and that was very, very nice. And so I sort of didn't pay all that much attention. And very interestingly, the place where I was staying, which was in the very north of the island, was the only place that I met other Americans. I didn't meet any other Americans, for my whole week that I was there. Only there, and like on the day when the election was happening. And that was actually kind of nice because we did then commiserate together the next morning. We kind of it was kind of like, oh, what do we do now? Like, okay. But so I kind of stuck my head in the sand, like quite literally. I went to the beach, I went hiking. I just kind of was like, look, I'm in this gorgeous place that feels so far removed from everything, and I just want to enjoy my time here. And the weather was great, and you could still go swimming. The water was warm enough. Great hiking. I, by the way, very much recommend the north of Tenerife as like a vacation destination. So in that sense, it was very nice. Of course, some people kind of messaged me and called me, but I kind of just ignored it all for a couple of days until I was back home. And then, since I've been back, I've, caught up a little bit on the headlines and sort of on the whole, breaking down what happened and whatever. And I don't know. I don't feel great, obviously, about it. I don't exactly know where it's all going to go. I think also for Europe, it's going to have, it's hugely consequential, right? So, we will see. But I don't know. I think in 2016, I already had my major moment of disappointment with the US. And this time I'm just like, well, I don't know. Like, I just don't expect much at this point. So, Austria votes the FPÖ, the US votes Trump. There's not much I can do.
Right. I think for me, that night I watched with a couple friends, and I don't, I'm in this super liberal pocket of a liberal state in Washington, in Seattle, so I don't think there was some sense like in my neighborhood that this was going to be the result, but it never would have been really. I watched with some friends, and it was kind of sort of a tense night because it was like just unclear where things were going kind of for a while. And it was like, oh, well, it seems like this is the outcome, but we don't know yet. There was a lot of that. We had like a bunch of different news channels on. So that was kind of the consensus we were seeing. And I think I feel a lot of the same things that you do, where it's just like, I think last time Trump won was maybe a bigger shock in the sense that I just didn't think that is sort of the way the country felt. And then this time it's like, oh, you know what? The country feels even more that way. So I think that's the part that I think a lot of us are thinking about, or people who are, interested in the topics that we discuss on this show, right? Which is going to be like this self-selecting group for sure that would even click on podcasts like this. But I think I'm just like kind of like you're doing. I'm checked out a little bit right now. I'd rather talk about Christmas markets.
Yes, where are we going to get our Glühwein from?
Right.
These are
Right,
the real problems I have.
Yeah. And then, at a certain point, I'll start paying attention again. And it's just, I think it's going to be a new reality in a lot of ways.
I'm kind of dreading that, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's like having to pay attention.
I think so, too.
This is what I don't want. I enjoy not having to really pay too much attention because I just feel like it's okay and it's not going to like escalate massively overnight because somebody tweeted something stupid, Like, I don't want to have to pay attention.
And, of course, we should always be informed. I think that's good. But it's also like, we have this illusion that if we pay attention hard enough, we can affect something. And we can a little bit, but just a little bit. And I'm trying to think about that this time, too. I'm like, okay, you know what? You can take breaks. And, I'm 10 years older than I was the last time this happened. Yeah, so whatever. I'm trying to, roll with this and be realistic and give myself time to kind of understand this sort of the reality that I guess was always there that I didn't know. I didn't mean that to sound that bleak, but but it's been kind of maybe a jarring week or two. Yeah, just because it was unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really expect it either.
Right, but it's there, and then this is the reality. So it's like, what do we do now? So we talk about Christmas markets, I guess. That's how we
talk about Christmas markets. We go to Christmas markets, and then
that is right. And then we'll figure out the rest later.
Then we go skiing, and then we go back on vacation in Tenerife, and just like
That's what I'm hearing.
Don't deal with reality. Is that a coping strategy? I guess so.
Maybe.
Denial. No, I don't know. Okay, well, I think those are the main topics that have kind of been on our minds or, in the Zeitgeist.
On that note, yes.
On that note, that is it for our show today. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, well then, don't worry about that review.
You can find us on social medias, Vienna Past and Prez on Instagram and now Blue Sky. We just got an account there. Send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Papa.
Bye.